Okay. Um, so thanks to you all for joining us this evening for Artist Talks with three of our monitors, William Waitzman, Ariadne Manuel, and Kara Gregory. I just have to say, Kara at the last minute had to drop out to take care of something. So they're actually not present. Just to introduce myself, I'm Robin Sharon, and I'm one of four of Manhattan Graphic Center's management team. This is the second talk of our spring term. We have one more scheduled on May 23rd, so be sure to visit our website at manhattangraphiccenter.org to register. It will be with Zoro Sidhu and Rob Swainston, and they will be talking about working collaboratively on their woodcuts. While you're there, you'll be able to sign up for our mailing list and see our other events and course offerings. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Manhattan Graphic Center would like to thank the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the New York State Council on the Arts, the Sherman Foundation, the Pierre and Tina Matisse Foundation, our members, and our other donors and friends, all who make our artist talks and programming possible. We'll be doing a Q&A after everyone's presentation. So if you have a question, you can click on the Q&A button that you see at the bottom of your screen and just type it in. And I'd like to say a few words about our monitor program. Pre-pandemic, shop monitors were all member volunteers. When we reopened last year, we invited past monitors back, but we also wanted to bring new faces to MGC, so we reimagined the program. We introduced a rigorous process that requires an application and includes an interview. The artists presenting tonight are returning monitor William Waitsman and Ariadne Manuel, but as I said, Kara Gregory, who's also a recent program participant, will not be present. That said, I'll introduce our first artist who's presenting tonight, William Waitzman. William is a painter, a printmaker, painter, and teaching artist. He learned silkscreen at MGC in 2008 and has been fascinated by the medium ever since. His prints are landscapes. Most are made by printing from 10 to 20 layers until the image is complete. And with that, now I will hand things over to William.
Okay, thank you, Robin. I'm going to share screen, clicking on my desktop, clicking on slideshow, and do you see a black screen with my name on it?
Yes, there you are.
Okay, thank you for the thumbs up. Okay, good evening. My name is Bill Waitzman. This is a photo of me at Manhattan Graphic Center. As Robin said, I've been printing silkscreens since 2008, and I'm very happy to be back as a monitor at MGC. Thank you, Robin, for that introduction. And I also want to thank the other members of the management team, Kay, Bruno, and Aneda, for all the great work you've done in helping to get the shop reopened after the shutdown. As many of you know, that was not a sure thing. And we really appreciate your excellent work. Not only that you work hard, but you make really great decisions. So we're really lucky to have you. I'll start showing my prints. As Robin said in the introduction, my prints are mostly landscapes. I use photos and sketches as references, but I'm often asked if my prints are photographic, and they're not. Even though I may use photos to draw from, everything is entirely hand-drawn in my prints. And the prints are mostly 10 to 13 inches in size. I print in layers, and I print from the background to the foreground until I feel that the image, the print, is complete. The number of layers varies from print to print. Sometimes it's only 5, 6, 7, but often it can be more than 10. It can be up to 20 layers. And because I print in this cumulative way, while I'm working, I'm printing a full edition. So when I've got the image, when the image is complete, the edition is complete. And my editions are usually about 20 prints or fewer. This is one of the first screen prints that I made, and it became the start of an ongoing series of prints that I'm still working on. I had no idea at the time. Over the years, the way that I draw and the way that I make a print has evolved. but I still have the same concerns today that I can see in this early print. This print, though, has a lot of flat areas of color. And that's typical of screen printing, but my prints now are not as flat as this one. This print does have some areas with pencil and crayon, and that's the kind of mark making that I'm more interested in the prints that I'm making now. So here's a more recent print, and the flat areas of color are gone here, and the whole thing in this case has a very pencil and crayon-y kind of texture. I think of these prints as an exploration of landscape through perception and memory. And I say that because making a print is time consuming and it's labor intensive. It's a lot different than making a drawing, a lot different than the immediacy of making a drawing. And so that time factor, which inevitably involves reconsidering and editing, I feel that that becomes part of the print. Just to show you a little about process, in case you're unfamiliar with it, silkscreen is, not to put down t-shirts, but silkscreen can be so much more than t-shirts. And it's a stencil process. And the print is made by forcing ink through a fine mesh screen with a squeegee. The stencil blocks areas that you don't want to print. So it can be those large flat areas, or it can be the crayon-y small little tiny bits that are being forced through the screen. It's the same theory. And the stencils are made by coating the screen with a light sensitive emulsion and exposing the screen and the image for that screen to UV light. I make my drawings on heavyweight tracing paper. I draw with ink, pencil, and crayon. And I make a separate drawing for each layer of the print. I work on a light box to align the layers so I can see how they work together. And I like to include rubbing and scratching techniques in the drawings. You can see that in that, what became the sky, that big area on the right there. And these were drawings for this print. I love screen printing because it combines drawing and painting, or at least that's how I think of it. And it allows for so many options for drawing and for printing in color. As I kind of said already, the course of making a print, the path from start to finish is rarely a straight line. There are always discoveries and revisions and digressions along the way, and they can all influence the outcome. Because of that, I try to keep from feeling disappointment when the print is not turning out as I imagined. Because my initial drawings and references are just the starting point. And the print is not a recreation or a reproduction. It's its own thing. You can see there's a series of 4 images from the same place. And for me, printmaking is a refuge from the digital world. I'm drawn to the physicality of making a print and to the discovery that's inherent in the process. And I feel very fortunate to have access to the wonderful MGC print shop and the community of artists who print there. I'm often inspired by artists who work in other mediums and whose work is very much unlike my own. So it's really great to see work in progress, to see work that's not finished, not just seeing finished artist work, to see something that you might see the next time and it's changed a lot. So that's part of the what's one great aspect of having this communal studio that we share. And I'm often asked where my imagery comes from, and it comes from all over. It can be a place, as I said, some of my prints are based on drawings, and I don't use photographs for everything. Some are based on photographs, someplace that I visited very briefly, took a photo, and that's it. It may never be there again. But I don't feel that any of the prints need to necessarily look like a certain place. People frequently say, oh, I like this print, it reminds me of. And it's like, okay, that's nice. It's nowhere near where I made the print, but if you like it, that's great. And I like when people appreciate the prints for what they are and don't guess about, well, where is it? Is it a place that I recognize? Is it a place that really is a beautiful spot in nature? And so for me, it was a real compliment when someone who follows me on Instagram and sometimes writes messages wrote, you live in a beautiful place. And the scene that she was commenting on was, I've done drawings, it's with my back to the highway. It's very much not a nature, it's not one of the beautiful spots of nature, but it's something beautiful that I found right there. So I think this person lives in Wales or somewhere where it probably is really beautiful, but if you like my print, that's great. So I appreciate the compliment. And these are all the prints that I have on the slideshow. And I just wanted to show you my website is my name, allruntogether.com. And my Instagram name is the same. My name just run together, William Waitzman. Okay, thank you very much. And I am now going to hit stop share, and I guess I'll hand it back to Robin. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, William, for talking about your work and for your kind words about the management team. We really appreciate hearing that and the feedback. It's really great. Thank you. Our next artist is Ariadne Manuel, who is a multidisciplinary artist working in printmaking and sculpture. Her art explores niche and vulgar narratives within natural history. She received a BFA from New York University with a minor in art history. Ariadne takes great pride in sharing her passion for printmaking with others, especially screen printing, lino cut, and intaglio etching. And you're ready to go. Kay is going to be sharing the screen, and here we are.
Hello, welcome everybody. I'm very happy to be here. As Robin said, my name is Ariadne Manuel, but you can also call me Ari. I have been working at Manhattan Graphic Center since January, so I'm relatively new. But I'm so far I've had the best time, and I'm looking forward to staying and continuing my practice with the Manhattan Graphic Center team. So after quarantine sort of began, it was recently after I had graduated from college, and I was at a loss for printmaking. I really miss being in a studio setting where I could make what I really loved, which were copperplate etchings. So Manhattan Graphic Center has given me a great opportunity to rework on my copperplate etching and make a lot of new things, which I will be showing and sharing today. Primarily, I am a intaglio etcher that also works in dry point as well on copper plates. These are a few examples of my favorite techniques in a project, within the context of a project that I am doing on what are known as vulgar histories or vulgar sciences. These three plates here are part of a series about superstition in regards to birth, marriage, and death. Each plate is about 4 by 6 inches. The paper is larger, but it's a triptych. And if we could see the next slide, I'll talk about each one individually. So we're going to start at the opposite end of the spectrum with death. This plate was made using hard ground etching technique, which involves coating the copper plate in a sort of waxy substance that provides a resist to acid, in that you soak the plate in to create the line work. The acid does the etching. So the main image in the middle here was made with that etching technique by scratching into the ground and then submerging the plate in ferric chloride. The image specifically is of a grave post with some pins at the top. This is from a superstition of Anglo-Saxon origin that states that when you carry the coffin of a loved one through the gates of a graveyard, you want to take a pin from their coffin and stick the pin into the post of the grave so that their soul doesn't haunt you and leave the graveyard after death or after burial. The next piece in this series is about marriage. It's the middle. This plate was made using the aquatint technique, and the as well as the hard ground etch. The aquatint is sort of raw. Aquatint is this rosin that coats the screen and then melts to create this really minute positive negative surface area that creates flat spaces of color on an etching plate. You can see a really great example of that in the shoe leather. I did what's called a step bite, which is when I exposed the plate to different time periods of acid to create darker and lighter colors. So the darkest area, the insole, for example, was exposed to the acid for almost 15 minutes. The lightest part, which is where those laces are, was maybe 5 minutes. The tradition or superstition behind this image is another Anglo-Saxon related superstition that if on the night of your wedding, if the bride puts her veil underneath the shoe of the groom and they set this outside of their wedding bed, their bedroom, they'll have good sex. And that is a great way to start a marriage, or so I'm told. So the next slide is the third of this triptych. This was made using a soft ground etching technique, which is very similar to the hard ground etching technique, where the waxy substance you coat on the plate doesn't dry, it remains tacky, so you can press things into it. Here I pressed some fabric swatches to create a sort of muslin background for the two baby hands that are framed in the middle of the print. This tradition or superstition comes from China, and it is an assurity that if you tie your baby's hands together with a little string the night before the first night of their life, before they go to sleep for the first time in your arms, they will not be troublesome in the afterlife. So they're really planning ahead for a non-troublesome ghost, which I like. And I appreciate the forward thinking of that. But these are three etching techniques that are really versatile, that I continue to use in my other etchings as well. The next image is going to be a new set of triptych prints that I have recently finished or completed, using some of those similar techniques, but also some new ones as well. These three plates are centered around incontinence, which is peeing the bed. This is more in the vulgar sciences or vulgar remedies narrative. Each plate represents a different superstition or technique to treat bedwetting, and each plate represents a more complicated cure to this problem. So if we could go through each one individually. The first one is a toad tied to a penis. The toad and penis tying myth is based on a Nigerian old wives sort of folktale that or treatment, that if you tie a toad to a young man's penis before he goes to sleep, once he starts to pee the bed, the toad will get wet and start to croak and wake the young man up, and thus scar him into never peeing the bed again. A big stretch for a small cure, but apparently it works. And it's a really interesting image. So of course I had to hop on that. This plate was made using soft ground, hard ground etch, and aquatint for that background. The next one is from my old friend Pliny the Elder of the ancient Rome. Pliny the Elder hypothesized that if you fed your baby who was peeing the bed raw mice with bread, that would cure the baby's incontinence. An awful image, to be sure, but I think I've turned it into something quite charming here with this plate. The middle, or the mice in the toast, is made with dry point and hard ground etching, and that staticky background is made using what I really like, a method I really like as a sort of DIY stop out, which is using spray paint. So you spray the plate with just a nice fine mist of spray paint, submerge it in the acid, and you get this sort of uneven staticky background that is harder to achieve with aquatint. And I'm a big fan of this method. So the next and final piece in this triptych is from a gentleman whose name is too hard for me to pronounce. But he's from the 1800s in the Netherlands. He thought it would be a really great idea to make suppositories out of sheep's fat and strychnine poisoning to cure incontinence, which is also just an awful, awful image. But I think, again, I've turned this sort of strange or awful, quite taboo topic or idea into something that has some charm, and also seems quite tame in its imagery. So this plate was made using dry point, hard ground etch, the silk screen, the spray paint, the spray paint aquatint method, and what's known as spit bite, which is where you use the acid itself like a watercolor and paint on the plate to create a sort of variation in tone, which you can see in the poison bottle. So these are my most recent etchings from Manhattan Graphic Center. As I said at the beginning of my talk, that I was really craving and missing printmaking over the quarantine, and so I taught myself how to do lino cut etching. And one of the great things about being at Manhattan Graphic Center that Bill touched on is that you're constantly learning from the other artists working around you. And it's been so fantastic to learn from other relief printers and other lino cut workers in the Manhattan Graphic Center studio, so that I've been able to further and continue and hone my skill as a relief printer. These are two very recent plates that I've turned into one image that are both lino cuts. The page is about 18 by 24 inches. And they're both fossilized oceanographic paleontology images. So the first one, which is larger and sort of more towards the upper left hand, is a tooth whorl. It's the jaw of an ancient shark that was called the helicoprion. And its teeth sort of came out in this sort of crazy chainsaw manner. The image on the bottom is a ammonite fossil. And an ammonite, it was an ancient cephalopod that similar to a nautilus. And these two plates are the beginning of a project in which I'm going to focus on circular repeating imagery within paleontology. I have a million ideas about a million different things all at once, and being able to execute some of those ideas and get them in print on paper at the Manhattan Graphic Center has been a great joy of mine in the past year. And I can't wait to continue and make more stuff. I'd like to thank everyone at Manhattan Graphic Center, the other monitors, as well as the management team as well, for being so open and welcoming to me and part of this community. And I can't wait to continue. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ari, for presenting your work, and also your kind words as well about the shop and working in the shop. So what I wanted to know, are we going to present?
So I think that we will have hopefully another round, maybe in the fall, and that I could go through Kira's work. It's so great and it balances so well with, we have screen printing, we have intaglio, and Kira's work is relief. But I think they will speak about it themselves better than I can. So I think we should
Cool.
hold out as much, as
Okay.
tempted as I am. So why don't we move on to questions? And if I wind up hearing back from Kira in the next, 15 minutes or so, then maybe we can do a run through.
Right. So if anyone has questions for William and Ariadne, please put it in the Q&A and they'll answer your questions. It can be about specific works or what it's like for them working at MGC. Just put it in the Q&A and we'll ask your questions. And maybe I'll just ask one to start. What are you working on now? And I'll start with Bill.
What I'm working on now is a print that is based on a drawing that took me about 20 minutes, and it's going to take me hours and hours to try to get a print that has the same spontaneity and freshness as that drawing. It's making me think that one direction I might take, this finally dawned on me after so many years of screen printing, is making some of the drawings for a print on site instead of trying to make this translation between something that I drew with a pen on rough paper and it just has a certain kind of line that I'm trying to not recreate, as I said, but just try to capture something that's there. So that's what I'm working on, still the same size. I consider it all one series, even though, they change over time, as I said, from that initial flatness to what I'm trying now. But yeah, so what I'm working on now is a print. I hope that I'd have it far enough along to bring it to show you. But I left it at MGC. I didn't bring it home. It's still working. But yeah, so it is making me think of maybe there might be a little difference in the way that I work, because why not take that translucent paper and draw with it anywhere, and then you can expose it to light instead of making an image and then trying to make another version of it as a print. So that's my current concern. Okay.
So Ari, I'd ask you the same question, but it ties into something that Bruno Nadalin is asking, who I should say to the audience that he's another member of the management team. Kay is as well. I should have introduced Kay. I didn't, sorry. But he says, great work, Bill and Ari. Ari, what's next in the folklore series? What are some of your source materials? So that kind of ties into what you're going to be working on next.
Yeah. So I work from a lot of different source material right now. It's a collection of the last triptych is all from the sort of archives or research of the National Urological Museum, which is in Iceland. No, it's in Ireland. It's a whole museum dedicated to the urological sciences. That kind of niche medical information is very fascinating to me. So I get a lot of inspiration from primary sources, whether that be a museum like the Natural History on 88th Street in New York City, or the Mutter Museum, which is a collection of gross oddities in Pennsylvania, or just direct writings and anthropological sources like Franz Boas, or other like Pliny the Elder's specific writing as well. I'm very interested in. So I really approach a lot of the projects, printmaking or otherwise, that I make with a lot of research involved beforehand. And then the final image is a culmination of that. So right now I'm very interested in delving into a little bit more of the vulgar sciences. Some other interesting cures that I've come upon are someone wrote in an old journal that putting a duck's beak, a live duck, speak in your mouth and breathing in its air will cure a thrush. I'm really interested in like where that came from, and who decided that was a good idea. So that's where I'm going next in terms of specific research. Look forward to that image all over the studio.
So our next question is from Ruth Moskovich. Ari, did you major in anthropology, and where did you learn all these myths?
I didn't major in anthropology. I have a bachelor of fine arts from NYU with a minor in art history. And that art history minor focused mostly on classics, so Roman and Greek specifically. I am a Greek American. My father is a second generation Greek American as well. My grandparents are both Greek. My yaya is Greek. And I grew up reading a lot of Greek myth and exposed to a lot of Greek myth, which opened a lot of other doors for other types of mythology. And that's where a lot of the stories that I'm really interested in come from is Greek mythology, Norse mythology, African mythology. But that sort of spiraled out during school into things like medical discovery. My mother was a marine biologist before I was born, and my love of the ocean and old beautiful things comes from her and her sort of tutelage. I had a lot of stuffed squid as a child instead of teddy bears. So it's sort of in my veins, that kind of thing. And I love it. I really I think if I could, I would have majored in anthropology. But it's so much more important to me to make images and translate these things, these complex ideas, into something that's very easy to digest with the eye. And I love making work about it.
Okay. So our next question is from an anonymous attendee, and it's to both of you. How do you spend your time at MGC? How much time is monitoring and doing what, and how much is doing your own work? So I guess we'll start with you, Bill, and then Ari can answer.
Well, monitoring is 4 hours a week. How do I spend my time when I'm a monitor? If nothing's going on, I can do a little bit of my work, but I don't go into the exposing room or do anything where I'm disappeared and can't keep an eye at. So I'm not sure if that was the question. The monitor shift doesn't mean that's time for you to just be an artist, but if you can get something done when there's some downtime during your shift, that's possible. I'm not sure if that was the question. How I spend my time in general at MGC is trying to be organized to do what I can do at home there and make use of the facilities when I'm in the shop. And that usually works best for me. When I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do going in, then my time's not used well. So I try to plan, what are my goals for any working session when I'm there.
You don't have a plan, you spend your whole day figuring it out. I've done that.
Yeah, we're always thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As William said, the monitor shift is 4 hours once a week. There's some clerical things that occur during that. But a lot of the time, especially when a class is occurring during your monitor shift, you can not only sort of sneak in some of that information for your own practice. Recently, Beth Gans had a photogravure class during my monitor shift, and I had so much fun peeking over her shoulder and learning the steps of photogravure and how absolutely difficult it is. And I really enjoyed monitoring during that or during classes, because I get a chance to be a little bit more active in helping the teacher, meeting new members of the studio, and also like seeing more work. I find this job most gratifying when I can help someone achieve something that they didn't think they could previously do in the studio, or helping them with a new technique or offering them just any of my advice. I really love that part of working at a sort of functional and almost and teaching studio, is the getting to share ideas with other people and getting to help out. I recently made new key rings for all the keys.
Oh, you did that. They're excellent.
Yeah, that was me.
I just want to jump in and thank you for that. That was beautiful. And just say to the anonymous attendee, send us an application, studio@manhattangraphiccenter.org. We have a wait list right now, but occasionally a spot opens up and we'll keep your resume on file. And we'll turn it back to the focus on the art.
Okay, so I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that, Ari, or your.
No, I try not to. I like Bill. I try not to disappear into any back rooms when I'm working during my monitor shift. But that doesn't mean you won't walk in after that, getting out of the elevator and see me hunched over a plate behind the computer. It will happen. I can't promise that it won't.
Okay. So Aneta, who is the fourth person on our management team, has a question. I think for you, Ari, I think you somewhat touched on this, but maybe you could expand. Ari, what inspires your subject matter?
Oh, it was a lot. I mean, I did touch on sort of my background and who my like what I was raised with. I have like a sponge brain. I love absorbing random knowledge. I'm really fun at parties for that reason. But not so great at Jeopardy, like that kind of knowledge. I am also type 1 diabetic, and I've had type 1 diabetes for most of my life, which means that I have an interesting connection with my body and with medical science specifically. It's a waxing and waning relationship, but I think I have to credit it for a lot of my fascination with the human body, with medical science, with oddities and things like that. I really wish I had a straight and clear answer as to why I find like some of the subject matter interesting, but it just sort of tickles a part of my brain that nothing else does. So yeah, I mean, I love the weird and wonderful. It brings me such joy, and sharing the weird and wonderful with other people and seeing the shocked and excited and scandalized looks on people's faces when I tell them about the frog and the dick and all that stuff really makes me happy. So maybe I do it for you guys. Maybe I do it for the shock of it all.
Okay. We'll keep that in mind. So Jay Judge has a question for you, Bill. So fascinated with the quality of tone and texture, how do you work with elements of chance in that the drawing doesn't always appear in the exposed emotions as it was originally drawn?
Okay, thank you for that question, Jay. Jay is an excellent printmaker. Not only are his images really powerful, but he's very particular about his printing. And he and I share a certain, we're very demanding of what we want out of it. So how do I deal with it when it doesn't come out that way? Usually not that well at first, even though I said I try to be not to be disappointed. You know, I can be really not happy at all when I don't get what I want. And what do? Well, try to test it out on another piece of paper before printing it on a paper that already has a bunch of layers. If you've gone that far and you've put it on the piece of paper, think of what you can add to it, how you can just keep going. And I think that Jay and I and other silkscreen printmakers too, you know, come across that. We can say that we keep an open mind and we work with the process, but you know, there are frustrating moments. And how do you deal with it? You try to save the piece of paper and save all the time that you've put into it. You know, the piece of paper, it's just a piece of paper, only costs a few bucks, but it represents coming to the studio many times, exposing screens, printing them. It's an accumulation of a lot of time. And so you don't try to be so rigid that you don't allow for any spontaneity, but you just try to find a way to make it work.
Can I ask Bill a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Sure, of course.
So I learned how to screen print in college.
Mhm.
And I learned first from a drawing-based like exposure sort of system, and then we learned CMYK,
Mm.
which is like a color mapping, sort of a bitmap, like how they print, for anyone who doesn't know, who's listening, how they print like magazine images where the colors are sort of layered in like a polka dot type pattern.
Yeah.
And if you don't get those exactly lined up and registered correctly, that could be a nightmare. But your registration is really beautiful and always like cropped very well. Did you take a long time to sort of realize how to register your prints the best at the studio? And was that like a hard learning process for you?
Yes and yes, yes. When I look back at some of my early prints that I was pleased with, it's like, man, this is sloppy around the edges. But it just becomes a habit of what you're trying to do. And I was talking to, oh, I'm going to blank out on her name now, someone who was a former monitor who I met for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about registration and silkscreen. I make registration marks, and sometimes this will be, the 20th layer, and I'll print it onto my plastic sheet for my system of aligning things, and I'll be just so happy. I'll slip that paper under and forgetting to tape off and get rid of the crop marks. It's like, great, last layer has these big ugly crop marks. So they're always, as much as you try, you can get distracted. Like, oh, I love how this came out. Let me just print it right now. And you make mistakes. It happens. So
The excitement of the moment can
yeah,
overtake the necessity of the registration marks.
yeah.
We were always taught to make them far away from the image so that you could tear them off and crop your image later.
Yeah, I know some people do that and have those
Yeah.
registration tabs that
But
they use.
it never guarantees a clean edge. That's trouble with silk green.
A printmaker who used to print it at MGC, she moved to Philadelphia for graduate school, and I believe she stayed there, Caitlin Santoro. She did really beautiful CMYK prints where you saw all those dots like that.
Cool.
So yeah, I've seen the actual prints, but I've never done it that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a few more questions. Let's see, this one's in the chat. Bill, is from Lars Milan, who I should say is one of our current scholarship students. Bill, can you please describe your process? How do you proceed with the different layers and the addition?
Okay, hello to Laurence, we've met. What I have found works best for me is to try to make each layer as though that could be the finished print. Maybe I know that there are going to be other elements on top of it, but I don't want to make it like a puzzle so that there would be something weird. I just try to figure out how to, starting from the background to the foreground, add elements where I could say, well, that will be the finished print. I thought there was going to be a tree on top of it, but it's some water with a hill, and I like that, and I'll leave it. That I've learned over time that locking it all in like a picture puzzle can leave me without an out, and I can paint myself into a corner. So that's one way of my thinking as I put together the drawings and check them out on a light table to see how they work together. I don't want to have things where if I print that, then I've got to do something else or it will be incomplete. So that's the only way I think I can answer that.
That's the thing you learn with printmaking, is sort of how to game the system. Like,
Yeah.
it's sort of like a cheat code where you're like, well, if it works out this way, I'll just say it was on purpose. And like, that's one of the best parts of art, in my opinion, but in printmaking specifically, is like, you sort of learn just how you learn to sort of blend color and apply layers as an oil painter. You learn how to like manipulate the plate or the image or the way you're printing it to your advantage. And the fact that there's a whole genre of art with like this sort of special underlying read between the lines cheat code knowledge is so cool to me. I love learning the secrets. It's so fun.
Yeah, and if someone tells you that they like it, you say thank you. You don't say, well, it's
Yeah.
not what I intended. Why would you say that? Don't give that away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt real quick. There was a request for Ari, I think your Instagram, and I know Bill shared his. Can we share yours as well?
Yeah, it's
I'm gonna put them, it's REM
96.
96 and William Waitzman, right? I'm gonna put those both in the chat right now.
I'll put it right in the chat. Okay.
So those are in the chat if anyone would like to take those right from the chat.
So Bruno has another question for Bill, and I hope it's not too technical. How do you control the opacity transparency of the layers in your silk screens? Are you going through lots of modification of the ink, or do you have other techniques?
It's using the, oh man, what is that stuff called?
Extender base.
The extender, yeah, adding more base. Sometimes I'll be more than 50% of the, I mean, we call it ink, but it's really paint. It's really acrylic paint that's formulated to go through a screen. So sometimes I use a lot of that extender base, and I'll test them out on little pieces of paper. Another thing I have learned over the years is saving scraps that are the same paper I'm printing on, because if I test a color on just any piece of paper, it may look very different, even though it's white paper, like the white paper I'm using, looks like it's the same tone. It's important to test things out. It can make a really big difference, the actual paper that you're using. So yeah, for Bruno's question, I would say it's all how much base that you use when you're mixing the inks.
Okay, so let's see, does anyone else have a question you'd like to ask Ari or Bill? This looks like we got through these. Okay, I guess not. Okay. We want very much to thank Ari and Bill for presenting their work, and we think these talks were great and the work is really outstanding. We want to also thank everyone who joined us tonight. I want to remind you, you can visit our website at manhattangraphiccenter.org, and you can sign up for future talks, see our other events and classes, and also you'll be able to sign up for our mailing list. You also can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook to keep up to date with everything we have going on. And with that, I will wish you all a good night.